In February of 2021, Texas was hit with a cold Arctic blast of air that impacted the entire state.
I opened my window and there was snow. I was like, oh, this is awesome. But then nobody is prepared for snow. Like, it is so unprecedented.
I'm a nurse, so I was unable to get to my patients. They live in group homes. Their group homes lost power for 4 days. They had no power, no water, no food. Me not being able to work impacted, about 100 plus people.
Luckily, we had plenty of food and water, and we have a gas stove, so I was able to cook and have hot meals for my family.
I had not prepared. I had no groceries. I had no water. That first night was kind of scary because the lights did go off. Then the pipes froze. Then they were shutting down the roads, and they shut it down just before it could go somewhere where I had heat and water.
Again, nobody could go to work or school, and having the power coming in and out without any rhyme or reason made it really difficult to know what to do.
Kind of scary, but I mean, we're the fortunate ones. We're young, relatively healthy. I can just only imagine people with small children, elderly people who are sick, who need those special accommodations, how they were going, because that, if it was nerve-wracking for me, I can only imagine the implications for other people.
You're having more weather events. We're having more hurricanes during the hurricane season, and it's getting colder, and they're expecting another ice storm again, which, once again, that's uncanny, but it's coming. So, this is what we got to look forward to. And if we don't do something about the climate, this is what everybody has to look forward to.
This year has been the hottest year on record. It beat last year as being the hottest year on record, which beat the year before it as being the hottest year on record.
I live in Las Vegas. I believe we reached the hottest around April time, and that was a record here for Vegas.
This summer was pretty brutal. It was one of the longest lasting summers. It started pretty early, and it went all the way into fall.
Drier, less snow on the mountains. It's impacted us here in the valley, where the flooding is so severe because it's flash flooding as opposed just to the runoff regular flooding.
Here we are in the middle of fall, and this fig tree has green leaves. It hasn't dropped its leaves, and it's producing and ripening fruit. This is climate change.
I'm residing in Shures, that's the name of the town, and it's on the Walker River Paiute Reservation, and it's unusually warm. And in fact, we have farmers, we live in an agricultural community, so we have farmers that are actually putting in another crop to see if they can squeeze out one more crop. So the growing season for them has extended, but then that impacts the amount of water that is allowed for irrigation throughout the year.
The Walker Lake, within my grandfather's time and my time, within the last 100 years, I would say the lake probably receded at least a minimum of 10 miles. Basically, the way our water is set up, the water decree between the natives and the outside is there was a certain amount of water, it was divided. And even with the droughts over the last 10, 15 years, we basically be paid not to farm because there was not enough snowpack within the mountain ranges.
I remember it was 2000, Lake Mead was completely full. You could just see the giant jets of water coming down at the foot of the dam. And now you go, it's 30% capacity now.
But the fact that you can see that hidden village or whatever it is in the lake, you're starting to see pieces of it, indication of how low the water is.
It sucks because it's not just Nevadans who use that water. It's people in Arizona and New Mexico, I think.
Cambria, California. It's this smaller section of Southern California. A couple of years ago, they were in such a high water ration that our neighbor was using the runoff from her laundry to water her plants because you couldn't use water in any recreational way.
One thing interesting to me growing up in New England was that fire is a season there. So you get the Santa Ana winds and the ground is so dry and the winds are so intense that they actually create friction and cause forest fires all over the hills. One of my friend's barns did get burnt down during the Paradise fires up in Northern California. My friend's grandparents' house burnt down.
In the last year, I went to a cabin with my family in June, and it was 4 feet of snow on the ground. All of a sudden, this cabin is in this massive wildfire, and it was maybe a month later. And I don't even know if the cabin is still there. So it's been very interesting seeing just the flip-flop back and forth. Like, California really cannot make up its mind on what weather condition it wants to portray for even a week at a time. So from snow in June to fires every which way.
In early July, a fire on the California-Nevada border, about an hour's drive from where I live, started. It was called the Tamarack Fire.
The fire started in Tamarack. Where we live was impacted heavily. The air quality, our air index was in the 300 to 400 range. If you looked outside some days, it was orange and dark.
Less than 10 days later, the Dixie Fire started, which was the second largest fire in California's history that we know of. That smoke came heavy and strong and thick on top of the other fire just to the east of me. And until the third fire of that summer that directly impacted me was the Calder Fire, which came up from east and south of Tahoe.
The cars were covered, everything was covered with ash.
And it was just a really crazy year because like the whole state was like engulfed in flames.
But it also affected the tribal resources there. Part of the tribe was being evacuated from the fires because the fire went exactly right through the tribe.
The air quality index went from, 20s into up to 650. When I was evacuating, one of the times the smoke was so extreme while I was driving in the car, and I had the internal air turned on, but also I had an N95 mask on, and it took me to get almost to the Bay Area, which is a 4-hour drive, before I could take that N95 mask off.
And the wind would change direction, and then we'd have some respite from the wind, but then that only meant that the smoke went somewhere else.
We started seeing smoke over on the East Coast as far up as New Hampshire from the wildfires out in California. It was so bad to the point that I'm not somebody who ever gets headaches or migraines, that I was having consistent migraines. I was having allergy responses.
We had days where folks who were working outside were warned not to go outside because the air was too polluted to safely breathe.
A dense fog, you couldn't even see the sun clearly.
We have also seen increased flooding events, whether that's on our seacoast, where sea levels are rising.
I live in Norfolk, Virginia, and the flooding in front of my house is happening more often than it used to, and it's getting higher than it used to. I used to be able to figure out when to get in and out depending on the high and the low tides, but I have had to wade home a few times by getting it wrong.
We've also seen flooding here in Manchester. Not very long ago, there was a huge rainstorm. One of our main roads was flooded, and you couldn't go down it safely.
I love the view, but I like it better when the water stays on the other side of the road.
I just wanted to show everyone what my street looks like. Notice that it's not raining. This is just the tide. Pretty normal thing. Looks like this. Yeah, you notice that my car, luckily, it hasn't really hit the water yet. If that happens at night, it can absolutely flood your car and you can just not realize it until the morning. And that's just kind of part of the day-to-day life in Norfolk.
I know that our seasons are changing as well in terms of when Our sugar maple is ready for harvesting to make maple syrup. It's one of our large economic activities here in the state, as well as surrounding states here in New England.
Within the waters and the fires have made a drastic change in our native medicines, our native plants, and especially, what we call our duba, our pine nuts, which was our staple. This year, when we went out, probably moved about 60 days, almost a 2-month time frame that the natural plants and stuff were already producing the fruit early.
The thing that's most vividly changed in my mind is due to dryness and the bark beetle disease, the trees are in distress.
I think it was 2017, and we had arguably the worst swarm of crickets I have ever seen. And apparently it used to happen back in the day. The winter storms kind of stopped in the late 80s, and now you're starting to see some of those rainfall patterns shift.
Because you're getting weather in places that don't usually get that weather. So the impact is large or grand because these people don't have the infrastructure to take care of these things.
The weather has created this massive social change. And so you have these people that are like fighting against each other as to whether or not to help these people in displaced circumstances and what their economic impact is and how that manifests into homelessness or into just like the way we think about displaced peoples.
The initial effects are the ones that we see and we experience, and the smoke and the lack of the infrastructure being able to get to us and the inconveniences. To me, the bigger and the longer lasting effects are what is it doing to our lands.
Climate change is affecting us, whether it's from these weather events or changing seasons, and we have to do everything we can to help make sure we have a future livable for future generations.
I definitely storms and weird weather like this that's uncommon, I definitely attribute it to anything. It's definitely climate change.
Like climate change it's real, and it affects not only the indigenous peoples, I would say, on the oceans, but also the indigenous people that live within the landmass, that a lot of things are changing for us.
Extreme weather is happening. Climate change is happening.
Many people are lulled back into, this won't happen again. But I don't feel that way.
In our new environment of our changed climate, we have to learn how to mitigate the changes and start working with them versus trying to convince people we can go back to the way it was.
We shouldn't have to be prepared for something so unprecedented, but if it does happen, I hope that we are prepared in the future. So,
which is why the Build Back Better plan will help with that infrastructure.
I want people to take the weather seriously.
We have to work on mitigating the effects of climate change by working with nature.
Take this serious because there might be a time that it might be too late, and we need everyone on the game to take action, to speak up, and to create a better living, sustainable planet for everyone, for us, for Mother Earth, and for our future generations to come.
Thank you all so much for caring about this issue and for being here to find out how to help and what to do. I hope you all enjoy